I always try and make stunts that aren't so dangerous but look dangerous. But with missions, we tend to always end up doing stunts that are really, really dangerous. And sometimes the audience would never really know how dangerous they are or how much skill you need in order to do it so it's not dangerous.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
Oh, it's great.
Hi, and welcome to StudioBinder. I'm Brandon Knight. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Second Unit Director and Stunt Coordinator Wade Eastwood. Wade, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Wade Eastwood, and I'm a Second Unit Director and Stunt Coordinator on movies such as Mission Impossible, The Mummy, Jack Reacher, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Troy, and a bunch of other sort of Hollywood blockbusters, X-Men, Men in Black, things like that. And best known probably for doing half the Mission Impossible franchise so far.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to jump in. So to begin with, for let's say the uninitiated, could you define what a stunt is or what may qualify as a stunt?
Well, anything that's got a risk factor to it. So, if a car is driving on the road at the speed limit, it's not a stunt. But if it's over the speed limit, it becomes a stunt. If it breaks traction and starts skidding, it becomes a stunt. And from there, it sort of escalates. So, anything that involves throwing a punch at someone is a stunt, because if someone steps in and the distance isn't right, you could get hit and hurt. So it's really something you risk assess something. You assess the risk, and if the risk starts creeping up, it's a stunt.
Now, could you tell us, as a stunt coordinator, what are your main responsibilities?
To deliver visual epic action and make sure it's safe, or as safe as can be. Obviously, it's a stunt. So at the end of the day, anything could happen, but my job is to eliminate the risk. So look at the sequence as a whole and see what I can do to deliver the best visual sequence and make it look as dangerous as possible, but not be as dangerous as possible. So just make sure I'm taking all the precautions, whether it's training the stunt people, the actors, to be competent enough to do it, and then having the right safety people on set to make sure that the safety of the action being done and the crew around it is safe.
And to that end, are you involved in the design of the stunt?
Absolutely, yeah. So, so my title is as a second unit director and stunt coordinator. Certain films you'll come on as a script, and there'll be action there as a car chase and be quite detailed, or a fight. This was what's happening, and you'll rehearse it and deliver it. The movies that I do aren't that way. We have characters that need to get from point A to B, and we have to come up with a sequence that gets them the best and most visually, stunning and challenging way of getting from point A to B. And that's just how we do it. So I get involved very early on in the movie, months or even a year out, and write with the writers and create with the director, and in Mission's case with Tom and Chris McQuarrie. It's very collaborative. And we create the best action possible, which stays within the story and the character. So we're not just creating action sequences that are visual spectacles, because if the audience aren't connected to the journey of the character or what's actually happening in the story, then it might stimulate you visually for a while, but then you're like, well, why is that happening? Which is a lot of films today. And this, we want to just make sure that the audience are on a constant journey with us, that it's like a wow factor, like a heartbeat. It's a pulse. We get, super high, like, the base jump on the motorbike. And then it's like, okay, we know why we got there. So now we're working it out. Then boom, we're into the train and what happens on the train and everything else. And so it's got to be a journey. So we got to create spectacle. We got to shoot it subjectively, and we have to create the journey. So there's a lot of involvement to get all those boxes ticked.
That actually brings to mind, I've seen you mention in some previous interviews you've done, character-driven action and plot-driven action, and that it's not necessarily just a person performing a stunt, but it's an actor playing a character performing the stunt.
Yeah, that's key.
Could you describe the process of, say, Tom Cruise performing a stunt as Ethan?
Yeah, it's very, it's super important that people recognize the difference between a stunt performer doing a piece of action, a trained world-class motocross rider coming in and crashing a bike or jumping it, and then someone like a Tom Cruise doing it. Tom has got to learn how to do the bike jump perfectly first. So he obviously can ride a bike and he can do all that well already. He's very skilled. But we have to teach him the techniques to riding that type of motorcycle and doing, let's say, that jump and landing that distance. So we get him very competent at that first. And then he's got to bring the character to it. He's got to act it so that we feel the tension of the moment, whatever it is, the jeopardy, and we feel the performance. So we got to get him competent enough that he can do the stunt, and then he's going to find the journey of the character and deliver that to the stunt. And then, like Tom did in Fallout with a helicopter, when he was doing a lot of the helicopter flying, he was so aware of where the sun was and where the light was that he would know on a look or a line of dialogue he wants the sun flaring through the lens here. And all that flying, he was doing that even though he was doing a massively difficult alpine descent with rotor RPM through the roof. And you've really got to be aware of your surroundings when you're doing that sort of alpine flying. He was doing that, but also finding the light and delivering performance. And I always use that little piece as a comparison because I'm a helicopter pilot myself, and I remember thinking like, I hope he's watching his rotor RPM. I hope he's looking at this, and he was. But on top of that, he was playing Ethan Hunt doing it. He wasn't just Tom Cruise doing it, which would have been hard enough in itself. And that's the big difference, to be Ethan. The thing about Ethan is he doesn't think first then act. The character acts then thinks. And I use a comparison like you're walking, the reason the audiences connect so much to Ethan as a character, you're walking down the river near your hometown and someone falls in the river, a kid falls in the river. I'm not going to think twice. A split second, I don't care. I'm in the river and I've got to rescue the kid. And then we might be getting dragged towards a waterfall or where, and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. My only thought was save this child or save this person. And that's very much Ethan. That's why I think we can relate to it. He has to save the world, has to save the person, and he jumps in no matter what. And then he's like, oh, shit, now what do I do? And I think people can really relate to it and relate to him because as a human being, he would jump in and save someone. So I think it's quite close, the character to the person.
Absolutely. It falls in line with what you mentioned earlier. Having action just for action's sake, it can make it feel unrealistic. So having that character or plot-driven action, it makes the stakes feel that much more real. Now, as a second unit director, I would imagine you're in charge of, choosing shot sizes or planning out the shots ahead of time. Could you tell us what are some of the considerations you take in coverage options?
Yeah, we trying to, there's only so many ways you can shoot something. We're always trying to shoot it in a way that the audience isn't cheated with cuts or with stunt doubles. We don't cut to objective wide shots because we can stay with our hero because Tom obviously does everything himself. So him doing that allows me or Chris McQuarrie to shoot closer and more subjectively on the character the entire journey. So the audience is so invested on the edge of their seat because we're not suddenly cutting to a big establisher or a wide or cutting away to a stunt double. They with that character's emotions and they can see what's going through that character's mind the entire way through the stunt or the action sequence. And I think that is key to Mission Impossibles and Tom. And we invest a lot of time in R&D on developing cameras and equipment and ways that we can shoot things without looking like it's a YouTube GoPro objective type, shot. We want to be in there, but also create, cinematic magic and have that depth of field and have that beautiful color and that color palette and the light, so that the audiences are enthralled and invested.
Yeah, it definitely works. There's a moment in that helicopter chase scene you were speaking of where, when he first comes over and then we have this shot where it's that, oh no moment. And without that, it might not feel as real. So I can see that it definitely works.
Yeah, I always try and make stunts that aren't so dangerous but look dangerous. But with missions, we tend to always end up doing stunts that are really, really dangerous. And sometimes the audience would never really know how dangerous they are or how much skill you need in order to do it so it's not dangerous. The amount of training to do that. So that's a lot of people can fly helicopters. A lot of people can fly helicopters in the mountains. Doing certain mountain moves like that, like rapid descents in a helicopter where, if your rudder RPM spikes too high, your blades are basically just going to disconnect and fly off. And then you're just a big, heavy lump of metal coming down to the ground. So you've got to monitor a lot of things. And if you get past a certain point of you get past a point of no return. So you got to catch it ahead of time. So if I was doing that, I'm obviously looking at the cockpit, I'm flying, I'm pitching the nose, I'm watching my rudder RPM, I'm hearing the noise, and that's all I'm focused on. But in a situation like that, Tom is doing that and thinking, when he landed, he told me, he's like, oh, I just thought if I did one more turn that way, I could get the light flaring perfectly when I deliver that look or that line. You think, how are you thinking about that? I was just hoping you were looking at your dials, but he can't just look at his dial because then the audience are just looking at Tom Cruise's or Ethan Hunt just looking at the cockpit, and he can't. He's got to explore and sell it to us, the jeopardy of the situation. And that is the very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of trust in the team.
Yeah, a lot of trust in the team, a lot of respect, which we do all have for each other. So it's great.
That brings up something I wanted to ask you about. In watching some of the behind the scenes featurettes, an idea of perceived danger versus real danger came up. Would you kind of be able to explain that?
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of similar to what I just said. So, people perceive danger in very many different ways, and that's something I've learned over the past. I could go and jump off a boat at backline in Hawaii and swim in through the big surf, and when let's say 8 to 10 foot day, and it's like a normal Sunday. Whereas a lot of people would, swimming in flat water in somewhere safe from 10 meters out would be a challenge. And you've got to recognize that different people perceive threat, action, danger in different ways. And we've got to appeal to the wide market audience. We can't develop action that's just so extreme and so unique that only a certain genre of people are going to be like, oh, he's doing that because of that, and that wing is that size, and that parachute's this and that. We've got to appeal to the mass audience. We've got to do action that the entire audience will recognize and enjoy, because it's all about enjoyment and making sure the audience enjoy the film, and it also fits within the character's journey in the story. So that's the really hard part. Is again, when we go out, we don't say, what's the coolest thing on YouTube at the moment, or what's the next greatest extreme sport, because it might not appeal to everyone. It also might really not fit with the character. We go, where are we now? How do we got to get over there? All right, what's a cool way of doing it, but that fits within the character? And then we start deliberating, and it's it's a mission just to get to the part of what action sequence we're going to do, and then we have to work out the timeline of what we have left within the schedule to train Tom to be competent enough to do it, where he's safe and competent, and then he can start giving performance. And if it doesn't work, or we start something, we think, it just doesn't suit the character, we're doing this for the wrong reasons, and we stop and we go and do something else. It's a very zero ego approach to action and to extreme, sports. It's what is going to make the audience have the best time, and what is going to suit the character and the story. That is absolutely key. And then we go for it. And obviously, with Tom being so competent and trained, as he's a pilot, fixed wing with planes and rotorcraft with helicopters, and he's a base jumper, and he can fight, and he rides motocross and drifts cars and races circuit racing with cars, and he can do all these things. So he's got the structure there already to be able to do a lot of things. But then to take him from having the structure and ability to a more world-class ability, we have to develop a very steep training curve, which would, he has a hell of a learning ability, and he applies himself because he's always pitches up physically fit. So his fitness levels are through the roof. He's all about training and fitness and being prepared. So when he comes, he is physically prepared. So we're not going to do one day's motocross. He's like, oh, I'm exhausted after 10 minutes. I'm getting arm pump. I can't do this. He comes prepared that he will do something that a seasoned rider will do straight off the bat, and then sees if he can push it further. So that preparation is key. It's not luck, and there's no chance. It's all preparation from him, and then he applies himself to whatever stunt we're doing until he's 110% competent, so that he can deliver performance after he's not thinking about the stunt.
And that's just one of these stunts where in the entirety of the film, there could be 7 or 8 of these massive stunts being performed. And I can't imagine all of the prep work that takes, the dedication, and the schedule's probably always changing, and you have your own personal life as well. So I mean, it's really impressive the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of work.
Yeah, it also seems that each movie seems to one up itself in the sense of risk factor of these stunts. So it's really incredible.
Yeah, it is, and it's always the question: what are you going to do next? That's going to, how are you going to top this? And I always say at the end, "Oh, just you wait and see." And don't necessarily have the answer when I say that. It's always the panic of how are we going to do it. But we collaborate. Tom McHugh and myself, we collaborate a lot. It's there's no closed book. We're like, right, this is what I'm thinking. It's very much collaboration of presenting ideas, and that doesn't suit Ethan, or that doesn't suit Ethan at this stage of the journey. Maybe that goes here, or that's just for visual. It's not right for the film. And we really collaborate on something that's cool and that we think the audience will connect with, and that's fun. And obviously Tom loves doing stunts. If he wasn't an actor, he would have been a stuntman. I've said it, many times. He just loves. He's that boy that grew up, not sitting around doing nothing. He grew up jumping off things and jumping on things and jumping in things, and that's just what he grew up doing, and that's what he loves doing.
I've never met him before, but I would venture to say that there's no one quite like Tom Cruise.
He's very passionate about his craft, about filmmaking. He's very passionate. He's hugely appreciative of the fact that he can do this job at that level and get the recognition he gets from audiences around the world. He's very appreciative of that fact. He's very compassionate, and he just gives 100%. As some actors are coming and going, I want to do that. Well, I want to do that like Tom Cruise. I'm like, all right, this is what it takes. Oh, can I do it in 2 weeks instead of 6 months? I'm like, no, you can't. Oh, well, I've got this thing and I've got to do this. And on that day I've got to go and it's like, that's not commitment. You got to have extreme commitment to be an extreme athlete at so many levels, not just the one level, on so many disciplines. Like, he can compete with the best on several disciplines, and it's hard to do, to keep your skills up at all those different disciplines.
Would you say that being a stunt coordinator and a second unit director is a rare combination?
No, being a second unit director and stunt coordinator is very common these days. It's you basically get to control more on your action. So you start as a stunt performer, and then after years, if you've been involved in the setup of a lot of different stunts, and you've got the desire and the passion to be a stunt coordinator, to lead a team and to create action, you become a stunt coordinator. And then if you really understand camera and character, then you become a second unit director / stunt coordinator. So you still have your team. I've got an amazing team. I couldn't do it without them. But I just get to therefore create the action and also shoot the action with my second unit, with my cinematographer that understands my pace, because I shoot very fast, and my first AD that understands how to run the set at that speed and safety and everything. And you just have your team, and it's like a family, and you go off and you deliver. It's very common, and a lot of second unit directors become main unit directors. They possibly would have been a main unit director if they hadn't gone into stunts. So this is sort of their journey, their path to it, and that's the progression. Like your Dave Leaches and your Sam Hargrave, people like that.
Now, from what I understand, Tom bounces back and forth between first unit and second unit. Is that traditionally how it's done, or is it typically, first unit has the main sets, the main actors, whereas second unit might not have those?
It depends on the movie. So on a mission movie, there's only one Tom Cruise. So McHugh and I do it together. On other movies, like there with Tom, like your Edge of Tomorrow, your Jack Reachers, your Mummy, things like that, then yes, he will shoot the dialogue scene or whatever it is with main unit, and then as soon as he runs out the building, whatever the action, then he'll come across to my unit, and I will shoot Tom, or they shooting other cast members doing other non-action related stuff. And then my unit all ready, and we've already rehearsed with Tom, and then we shoot the 6-week car chase or whatever it is with Tom.
To have him in every single shot, first and second unit, it really speaks to his commitment to the role. I could imagine there could be some actors out there who might say, just get my stand in that second unit.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had that with an actor on second unit. Most of the time, the actors love second unit because it's the fun stuff. They're sick of being on set, like re-delivering the dialogue line under the hot lights, 500 times. It's like, the different look or the different expression in 25 different ways. And it's like, all right, I get to go and drive a car or do something cool on a motorbike. And second unit time, it's fun. Um, with me, I'm lucky enough that I enjoy performance and actors. And so I get to do, quite a lot of the performance stuff and the dialogue with them as well, because I've got a great relationship with the actors and the main unit directors, that we have a good trust, which allows me to deliver a better performance within the action as well.
All right, now I'd like to jump into some specific scenes from Rogue Nation. The hanging off the Airbus or the underwater vault. Does either one of those pique your interest to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, both the A400 and the Vault both took a lot of training. I mean, the underwater took a lot of training for Tom to hold his breath, over 6 minutes, so on a breathe up. So that from the training side was and the mental side, because you got to accept that you can stay underwater longer. And I was doing it with him for a little bit, and it was really, really hard because you're telling yourself, I can't stand underwater longer. I need to take a breath. And it's like, all right, I'll do one more second. And you shoot, you pop your head up above the water. But so he's very mentally strong, and as well as physically strong, Tom. He'll trust in the process. And if you tell him this is it, he will trust that it's possible. And that's why he can do what he does. So from the underwater side on the Taurus, he did remarkably well to go under there. And I mean, it was worrying. I mean, I went in the water with the safety divers 2 or 3 times to get him when he was doing the drowning scene, because I actually thought he was drowning. And then he was like, "What are you doing, dude?" I'm like, "I'm acting." Yeah, he's like, "I'm acting," and I'm like, I just couldn't. I mean, I've worked with him a long time. He's not only a colleague, a professional colleague. He's a dear friend of mine, and it was quite horrific to watch. To watch that, because he was delivering it well, but he was also underwater for so long before that I was like, he can't give me a sign. Obviously, he's in the middle of a scene. But it was horrible for me. I didn't enjoy it at all, that sequence. The A400. On the outside of the A400, that was great. It was planned, and we actually, it was all very, controlled within what we did. And Tom rehearsed, and apart from having a bird strike or something that could have hit him on the outside of the plane, which was out of our control as much as we could, we flew clear path. We had, other planes going before. We had bangers on the runway, and we did all we could to prevent that happening. But it's a stunt. At the end of the day, something could always happen. And we had, ways of rescuing him if we had to, if he got beaten up on the side of the plane. But just the prop blast from that, and flying around the countryside, and the blast on his face from the props alone. Forget the forward airspeed, just those props starting up was like, incredible on that machine. So yeah, there's a lot of ballsy stuff that Tom's done, but not without preparation and being competent enough to do it. We never do anything that's just. We don't think of something and do it the next day. It's planned. His body's prepared for it. The training plan is put in place until he's competent and it's safe. The right crew and team around him, and we go for it. Same as any great sport, any great feat that happens, whether it's Felix Bongano jumping from space, when he jumped from space for Red Bull, the Stratus, whether it's whoever it is doing something unique and huge that's impactful, you've got to build a strong team around you that are your support team. That help you get there, and you feel safe with all the emergency drills and that's what we do with Tom.
Now you're mentioning the preparation work it took for that underwater sequence. Could you possibly walk us through the previs process for that sequence?
Yeah, we previewed the shots, and the scene was that he is, um, he's drowning. The clock's running out, and he's drowning. And then the more we got into the story and the previs, the more we got into, we want to hold the shot longer, so the audience are taking a breath with you. You know, when you go and watch those underwater movies, when you end up taking a breath with, and your heart starts going, and that's really what they wanted. McHugh and Tom wanted. So how do we get there? We got to hold the shot longer. We're not moving the camera, so we're not doing a little cheat past them where it looks like a oneer and we're doing a little morph or a little blend. He's there in frame, so there's no blend, there's no morph, there's no CG. Well, how do we do it? Well, we just got to have to hold his breath longer. So we start the training process. We bring in, a world class freediver instructor and gets within the team, and we just start training, and we just start, baby steps, and we do it until, it's 1.5 minutes becomes 2.5, becomes 4, becomes 5. It's just keep going.
So is really just training your body really all it takes to get to that point, or are there certain techniques that he used?
It's a lot of technique, a lot of commitment, and a lot of mental preparation. I would say the mental part is extreme in breath hold.
Yeah, because I mean, you're literally telling your heart to beat slower.
You are, and you're also telling your mind that you can actually, even though you've run out of breath, that you haven't run out of breath, and you can survive longer.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Could you also speak to the camera and lens choices in some of these scenes? For example, in the Airbus scene, there's that one static shot. Was that by choice, or was it the only option available, or was it just all that you wanted or needed?
No, we didn't want to cut there. I mean, it's such a dramatic shot that we just, apart from the cut to Benji later when he's on the ground in the ghillie suit there, we didn't want to cut away, and we wanted the audience to just be on that journey, like feel the runway, the sort of steep takeoff, and we had to. It was a lot of approval process to get a camera on the side of a plane. We had to build a very special rig and get all sorts of approvals. You can imagine this military aircraft, and still in the early stages, this aircraft as well. And we had the aircraft for 2 days. We had a day to rig and prep and rehearse and a day to shoot. That's all we were given. So we had a lot of stuff to do. So we had lots of visits to the factory and coming up with R&D and CAD drawings and getting our rig inside and approving it and making sure that the test pilot at any stage could override and say no. We had an amazing test pilot. It was his last flight before he retired, actually, and he was an incredible, incredible guy. And he just entrusted us. And obviously, Tom's an aviator. He flies a lot, and he loved that about him. I'm an aviator myself as well, my team. So he loved that we're all from that world and different levels. And he just trusted us to do what we do, and yeah, and we delivered.
Another scene I wanted to speak about was the helicopter chase scene from Fallout. Could you tell us how that scene came about, like how the idea came about, and then also how you got to the point of where you were able to shoot?
Yeah, it was. We wanted to do a helicopter chase. That we thought there hasn't really been a great one in film for many, many years, and we wanted to do something different again, shoot it more subjectively, not two helicopters objectively from another camera ship. And what is the story? First of all, where do we start? Where we got to get to, and how does it work within the story with August Walker? With the Henry Cavill character. So that was the most important. Every time we started elaborating, getting this big sequence growing, and I'd start being, I can do this, and we can do this. I'm not, it's like, we're getting away from the story and the character, so bring it back in. So we just breathe the whole time between McHugh, Tom, and I. We just breathe, and we breathe the sequence until it's got that structure all the way through the core of it. And then I went down to New Zealand, which is actually where I learned to fly helicopters in Wanaka, with Wanaka Helicopters down there. So I went down there and got with some of the old pilots that I knew from down there when I was training. And we flew all the sort of canyons and mountains that I used to bomb up and down when I did my license. Just this, spectacular in the South Island. The landscape's unbelievable. And just filmed helicopter to helicopter and just, GoPros and cameras, and started really just structuring a rough sort of plan of events, where we could go, what we could do. And we had this whole sort of library of stuff. We thought, we could use this for that and that for that. And that doesn't really work. We need something else in here. So let's crash the helicopter and do this here. And we just built. It's very much an organic process. Again, with Chris McCrory, the director, and Tom Cruise and myself, and it's just, it's like a writer's room. No one is not allowed to talk. Everyone is allowed to talk. We have got to get the best ideas. There's no bad idea. Don't take it personally if you get shut down. It's like, get back on with another idea and let's keep it. But if you stray too far from the character, so it's like, come back in. Okay, too much on this, come back in. And it's just this rubber band effect we keep doing. And then if we get it, if we don't, we move on to another sequence. We do something else. But if we get that in there and it all sort of, merges, then all right, we've got something here. Let's board it, and let's start going for it.
You were saying you did that pre-flight. You kind of mapped it out beforehand. I would imagine there's a lot of engineering and testing. The science behind what can a helicopter do and not do.
Yeah, and also how can we film it? That's the big thing. Is like, we R&D equipment. Like if you look at the cameras on Top Gun Maverick on the the wings of the plane, it's like a year ago I was asking for something for a couple of years before that for a Le Mans movie, and the gyros just couldn't keep up. So they're like, nah, you just can't do more than that many G or that speed. So it's how do we develop that? So Tom will put in an R&D time and budget into just developing the unique pieces of equipment so it can do what we want. And if we get that, all right, now we're getting closer to achieving our goal. If we can't do it, if we can't capture it in the right way, then there's no point in doing the sequence. We're not into objective, all these objective shots. So if we can get that right, and again, all the boxes, all this rubber band of stuff, bring the sequence back to the character. Okay, this is working. Can we capture it with the camera? Oh, that doesn't do that. All right, we develop our own. All right, the camera's back in here. So everything's back into this nucleus of working. And then we go forward and we can do it. And capturing it is absolutely key. We had an arm on the front of that camera. Like it's very similar to the R1 arm, which is what you put on cars for commercials, where it's this big arm that sticks out the front with a camera and you spin the cars around. It's used in a lot of cool car commercials. We basically did that with a helicopter, but we had to design a special one because the blades flap. And if the blade flaps down, it could hit the camera. So it obviously had to be passed through all the necessary channels, FAA, CAA. So we had to develop, again, specific pieces of equipment unique to this film. And then Tom's got to fly the helicopter with this drag, the new drag coefficient, all these different things happening, which are giving you different performance in the helicopter while still trying to make the shots dynamic, find the light, and give performance. So there's a lot goes on behind the scenes. If the shot looks dramatic in the cinema, believe me, the behind the scenes is 5 times more dramatic.
Now, what would you say was the biggest challenge in that helicopter chase scene?
I remember the biggest challenge was trying not to make it boring, because 2 helicopters in a big ravine or a big valley or a big something, it's just they're 2 little things flying. It's very quick to be chasey, too long, get bored. And it's how do we make it dynamic? How do we keep the tension between the characters? How do we make it that someone's got to get there and get this, or that's going to happen, and this one's got to get, and all these sort of stories happening within the story. And again, it wasn't so much the action; it was keeping the story alive within the action that was which was key. And then just coming up with some cool moves for Tom to do and fly, so that you really did feel the background shifts. Probably one of the biggest challenges on the helicopter sequence in Fallout was when Tom drops to the ball. So normally, 100% of the time, I won't even say 99%, that would be done on a studio backlot with a hanging helicopter gimbal off a crane and a ball with the wire rigs all through the helicopter gimbal and down to the ground with a nice descender and everyone on the ground with a cup of coffee. We in mission style had to do that, 2,000 foot off the ground in a real helicopter, and the back of an A-Star or a Squirrel helicopter is not big. So we had to design a special rig that could do a compound of wires and cables. And I was leaning out the helicopter. They actually, had to remove me. I leaned with CG. I was leaning out, giving commands and cues to my riggers in the helicopter and to Tom. And the line had to be flaked in a way that it wouldn't suddenly, when he dropped, wouldn't catch and tangle, because it would rip him apart. So that was hugely challenging. When you see Tom let go of that helicopter, he's in free fall. He drops the 40 foot down to that ball, and he hits that ball hard in the film, and even if you make it a bit soft, it's still hard. And the rigging of that, it was also, it was freezing cold. It was in New Zealand, southern, with glaciers and snow on the mountains and freezing cold. We would have bought and land in fields after at one take. We'd land in a field, we wouldn't make it back to base, even with Tom in the helicopter. And you wouldn't think, because when he's in performance, he's so committed. And then when you cut, I mean, you can see the cold on him. He is blue in the lips and he's shivering. It was freezing. We were all, in Arctic gear and all quite happily hanging, in our work gear. And he was in his character gear. And we landed 2 or 3 times in a field out in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand, and just got blankets on his, space blankets and things. I'll just give him a hug and like wrap him up and just let him stop shivering for a while. And I'm like, let's go back to base, have a cup of coffee or something. He's like, no, let's get one more. Like 6 more later, we're still going. And, it was just the physicality of what Tom does is immense. I mean, he really does connect physically to these roles.
That is amazing. You would expect, like someone to be able to do 1 or 2 takes, but you're saying that Tom did 7 or 8 takes?
Oh, he did. Yeah, we do it until the shot's there, until we all agree. We look at the playback, we all agree that's in the movie. And if we don't agree, we keep going. But there's no behind the scenes on any of that. There's no footage of any of that. He doesn't want sympathy. This is a craft that he's proud of, and he feels so privileged all the time. He mentions it, to be able to do what he does, and for audiences to watch the movies and to appreciate the films. He really does feel so honored. And to the point where he just doesn't want to disappoint, and he just wants to deliver, and he enjoys it as well. But, he will endure a lot to make sure we get the shot.
Now, as far as coverage, it would seem that, especially with the Airbus scene, the arm on the helicopter, that the coverage options would be pretty limited. Purposely to, you want to see him, you want to see that action, but wouldn't that be a challenge in and of itself?
Yeah, and we do limit our coverage, because we know what we want, subjectively. If we just shoot every angle and every wide, we might be tempted to use them, and we don't want to, because we can't feel jeopardy, we can't feel the strain on the character, and the tension that he's got to save this or that. He's got to be there. We've got to deliver that first and foremost, and placing the cameras is essential, and placing having the technology of the new development from our R&D to be able to place the cameras that we've developed in the right places.
Like the Halo jump, correct? I mean, you have the camera operator. He has the camera on his helmet, and that's your shot. That's really the only option you have, correct?
That's it. And Tom had to fly up to him within a sort of 1.5 2 foot of the lens, and stop there at 30,000 feet, after the breathe up on the way up. So it was at night, and multiple 100 jumps. Yeah, it's the body's going through a lot, and you see it when skydivers working with Tom, cameraman, guys with like 15,000 jumps, 20, 16, 18,000 jumps, and they're all gung ho, and which is great, and they're positive. We've got great people around us, but then when Tom's like, yeah, that's not it, let's go again, and they're thinking, gee, are you serious? we've done 10 already. Like, I was all gung ho, and then slowly it's like, yeah, I think that was the shot. Don't you think that was the shot? I think we got the shot. And he's like, no, I don't think so. And he's in a tremendous physical shape. He's not slowing down. He's just ready to go. It's like, let's go. As if it's the first take. It's like,
wow, that's wild. Now, as far as lens choices for something like that, with all the variables going into the actual stunt, is that something you plan for ahead of time? Is it done with a stunt person before?
no, we'll do it on the ground. We'll mock it up on the ground, or we developed a wind tunnel so we could work in the wind tunnel in between shooting other scenes at the studio. Big outdoor wind tunnel, so we had natural light. Work out some things in the wind tunnel, but we never were going to use the wind tunnel in the movie for any shots. It was always going to be done practically. And yeah, so we did a lot of R&D on that way and worked out the right things, and then methodology of how we could get out the back of the plane and keep in the shot and in that tension on him with the red lights and everything, and how we could keep the audience connected to what he was feeling. And we just rehearsed it that way, and then just went out and shot it. No, there's no doing it with a stunt double. He is his own stunt double.
Now, having the halo jump at night, I would imagine that required a wide aperture. Is that where the limited depth of field came from?
Yeah, everything's based on the shot parameter, so we have to exactly that. We we'll see what our wider scope of focus is to give us the most cinematic shot, but also to deliver the performance from the character. And we look at, if we're going too much on this way, again, we just look at everything, and what's the most important is delivering the performance. Right, we've got to sacrifice this a little bit or that a little bit. We don't want to sacrifice it. Let's build our own lens and develop our own one that can give us a little bit more. So there we go. We'll build our own lens.
I would imagine shooting during the day would have been much easier. You have your choice of depth of field, everything.
It ain't mission possible.
Now, what would you say was the biggest challenge of that halo jump?
Just capturing that shot, getting the shot right and getting it at that altitude, and what it takes to get up to 30,000 feet and skydive with all your, oxygen you'll breathe up, and having the right team on board. And, we had, Abu Dhabi, with the military and everyone, they were incredible, so helpful. So again, just structuring the right team to make it all happen, all the training in the wind tunnel, getting, everyone on board on the same page. So it was logistically challenging as well as physically challenging. But we had the shot in mind. Once we knew what we wanted and the shot was achievable, then it's just how we're going to get it shot. There's no question we're going to get it shot. It's just where and when.
All right. Well, I'm sure we can't talk about Dead Reckoning too much, but maybe you could walk us through the process from idea through execution of the cliff jump.
Yeah, the cliff jump came about. Tom's always wanted to do a base jump, and he loves motorbikes. So why not ride a motorbike off a cliff and do both in one go? And we wrote in this chase sequence on a bike that he ends up at the top of a cliff, and worked out all the parameters. We did a lot of rehearsal on this. We had built our own motocross track, and Tom was doing motocross all day. I mean, he would go skydive in the morning or skydive in the afternoon, depending on the weather, and then motocross the opposite. If he's motocross in the morning, it's skydive in the afternoon, and we had the helicopter next to the motocross track. So we'd do motocross, finish the bike, get in the helicopter, go up, and just do tracking runs with the team, just getting perfect tracks. Then we'd find out we built another ramp and did some proxy jumps and worked out speeds, and then he would do the speeds on the side of the helicopter and work out how he could exit the helicopter at that speed and get the perfect track without a wobble. And I mean, we're talking hundreds of jumps and hundreds of jumps on the motorbike too, until he was so competent at both. And then we put everything together. I went out and scouted cliff tops all over the world to try and get the perfect ramp look cliff top that would into a bowl that was menacing. When you went off, it wasn't just sheer, or the background was menacing, and it was a bowl, and it was a cloud formations, and so I came to this one place 2 or 3 times, and with my team, and we jumped it and in various different ways, and looked at it and thought, oh, here's the dangers of this. We can get a wind swirl in here, some turbulent wind, some rudder off this, and if he has a line twist, he can get smacked into the rock here. If the delay can only be this long, if he has anything wrong, he's going to hit the terrace down below where it's like this. It's not like this all the way, and he's got to track out into the valley for lane. So we looked at all the risk assessed every location, and eventually came up with that one, and then we did it. And I said it in past interview, but I've been doing this a long time, like 32 years, and he's a good friend of mine, as well as someone I work with in a professional capacity. But when he went off, even though I knew there was no one more competent, when Tom rode that bike off there was no one in the world more competent of riding that bike off that cliff and base jumping. He'd done the work, and he was ready. But when I cued him, because I was right next to him, when I gave him the cue to go, and he actually went, and there was that silence as he dropped off the end of the ramp. I mean, it was in my 32 years the first time I've had an emotional on-set moment for sure. It was breathtaking, and yeah, it was just waiting for that delay, which felt like 10 minutes, not 10 seconds. Just waiting for that from my ground crew to say they had a good canopy.
For that sequence, was there any special equipment that you had to develop or that was used? I mean, because everything that was captured is just beautiful.
Yeah, we had amazing helicopter and drone pilots. Which it was more importantly than that is we didn't want to again do it wide objectively. We wanted to try and be right there where he came off. So we had to have the drone right there, and obviously if he hit that, we're in trouble. So we did multiple. I set up a proxy, rehearsal, a simulation of bike into boxes so that we could save the motorbike and exact arc with cables, and we put the drones there, and we had little GPS trackers, and we measured so that, out of 50 jumps, this was our path, within a meter of this path, so we could put the drone right there. And as long as he did the same speed, there was no speed on the bike, so it was all by sound. Tom knew which gear and which RPM and which sound to hear, and he kept that sound the whole way. And as long as everything was working exactly like that, and the gear with the acceleration that we had, and the position and the sound, then it would be perfect. But obviously, he's got to ride the bike down off the mountain as Ethan. So he's got to forget that he's just riding a motorbike as a base jumper. He's got to do it as Ethan, so we believe that he's Ethan Hunt. Then he's got to, make sure the bike doesn't break down. If the bike spluttered before the end of the ramp, we're in serious trouble. If the crosswind comes and blows him off the ramp, we're in very serious trouble. So everything was perfect, so that I would be with my little wind meter and crosswinding, and when everything matched, then I would cue. So he'd have to be. We had a 5-minute call for Tom to be from the ground on the bike riding. That was it, ready to go. So no one would talk to him, no one could interrupt. I wanted him to keep in that mindset, that focus, and he has to come off the ramp, see these cameras right in front of him, but believe he's not going to hit them, not look at them, play Ethan. He's got to separate from the bike without getting caught up in it when it rotates. Then he's got to do the perfect track away from the bike and the cliff, have the perfect delay time for opening. And then once he opens, make sure he hasn't got a line twist or a line over or anything like that, so he doesn't turn and go straight back into the mountain, that he can, get a clean exit out and fly into the valley. So again, in the movie, everyone goes, but really there are so many other things going on that the audience won't be aware of to make that little wow factor. And yeah, he delivered. And then, we even, we put cameras on Tom with selfie, like on motorbikes with selfie sticks out the front, and we did all sorts of crazy stuff,
Yeah, I was wanting to ask you, you said there was the helicopter and the drone, but you said there was also bike mounts. Was there anything else?
We had multiple cameras. Yeah, on that we tried different ways, but yeah, the drone and the helicopter was our main camera. We don't want to cut it up. It's just such a moment. You want to be in with him on it. You watch the behind the scenes. You're holding your breath for the moment he starts moving on that bike. So we don't want to really cut away from it. We want to be with him because we don't have to cut away from it. We're not cutting to an actor riding along the bike out of shot and then we got a stunt double. It's all Tom. So let's not cut.
And where is the location that the cliff jump was filmed?
In Norway. Norway's, breathtaking, stunning country. Yeah, we lucky enough. We've got to film, in Norway, and we trained in New Zealand and the French Alps, and Abu Dhabi, and Rome and Venice, and we constantly, the crew feel appreciate how lucky we are to be able to travel, especially during that global pandemic where we had to shut down and come home, and all the crew, we've all got families, and some that lost people along the journey, and we all had to sort of really get together and support each other. And Tom was very supportive of everyone and the situation, and hugely supportive actually, and everyone sort of really stayed together and got together. And I think even though we'd done a lot of movies together and we'd been on the film a long time already, the mission sort of family got even tighter. It was pretty unique crew.
Really well done.
Yeah,
everyone, the whole team.
Yeah,
You guys did a great job.
Oh, look at that. You just see the close up. Look at that.
You did an average job too, though.
Yeah, average.
It's pretty average.
That's all I want. As long as I just average.
Consistently average.
I don't mind.
Be sure to check out Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which releases in theaters on July 12th, 2023. And for more interviews and deep dives into the StudioBinder software, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified whenever new videos are added. Again, I'm Brandon with StudioBinder. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.